Hey friends, I'm back out in the utility building to work on the water system one more time. I'm not terribly surprised. I have a small leak in one of the fittings. This is the second fitting that I've had to fix. The first one is holding up just fine, and I'll show you the other one. But what's happening is there's a little bit of a drip. What happens is it takes about 10 minutes to leak down a very specific portion of the piping here to cause the pump to kick back on, but then the pump is only on for a fraction of a second, which then means it shuts back off. That hammers the pipes pretty hard. So I'll show you what's going on, take it apart, and see if I can fix it. I use some paper towel to check all these fittings to make sure which ones might be leaking, and the only one that's showing a leak is this one right here. What I'm doing is marking the position of that fitting so I can make sure I can get it back together in the same way, because it goes to another piece of pipe up here that is important that it stays in position. So I'll go ahead and pull that apart and I'll goop up the fitting, see if that fixes it. And I've just loosened this union. There's going to be water come out. I'm going to try to catch it in the buckets down there on the floor. I'm not too terribly concerned about having some water on the floor because this is a utility building. So that fitting is off. Now I need to remove another connection down here. You may remember that I installed this Y strainer in line, and this Y strainer has two unions on it. I'm going to take it off on this end, I think. And more water is going to come out, but can't be helped. I've unscrewed this check valve about 3 turns on the pipe on the right hand side, so I have access to the threads. I'm going to use some pipe dope on these threads. I didn't use it on the other side. I didn't need to. Now I'm going to go ahead and put some on here. I'll bring you back when that's done. Well, the pipe holding the check valve is back in place. The two unions are screwed back together. No leaks so far. All I have to do now is turn on the pump, let it pressurize, and see if it holds at least for several hours. But I'll bring you back later on this afternoon after I've done that test. Well, it doesn't look like much, but that's the new hydraulic pump that has an electric motor to run the pump. That powers the liftgate. Really doesn't look like much, but it was a real pain in the neck to get it in there. There was a lot that went into it, looking for the specs of the hydraulic pump, comparing it to the original. Well, let's go take a look at the original pump and figure out why I ended up going this way. This is the original motor that powered that hydraulic pump. It looks a little crusty, but not too bad. A lot of dust, it looks like. But let's go look a little more closely. Right here, there is a clamp that is supposed to be holding something in. We'll see what that is in a minute. But down here on the shaft, that's all rust. If if this hadn't been so heavily rusted, I could have just taken it to a alternator or starter motor repair shop. They would have rebuilt it and it would have been just fine. But there's a few things that are a problem here. Here we have the real problem. The face of this pump is also rusted, as you'd expect. Water got into this system because there's no O-ring. There's no positive seal here. Now there was supposed to be a housing to hold this thing to keep it safe from water and dirt, but that was long gone by the time I got the truck. So this I could clean up, but here's the problem right there. That's actually a bearing that was supposed to come out of this housing when I pulled the motor out. And the only problem is you can't pull it out with this little bit right here. That's a tang to connect to the motor. The problem with that is there's no way to pull the bearing out without taking the entire pump apart. Once I take the pump apart, then I could possibly press this bearing out. However, I got a replacement motor and found out that bearing should have come out. There's no manuals on this or nothing to tell you how it should be done, because the original company just would replace the whole unit if there was a problem. I looked at this and there's a possibility that I could pull that bearing out if I had what's called a blind pilot puller, but I don't have one. Well, and the other problem is that little bit of metal right there would keep the puller from being able to go in and grab a hold of this bearing. So when it was all said and done, I had to return that motor to the original company. That's the aftermarket company. And I bought the new unit that's underneath the truck. Then the other issue is this unit right here is steel. The new one is aluminum, which means I have some issues of corrosion going on. And more importantly, I had questions of how much I should be tightening these bolts up to hold the thing together. So it took a bit of research to find out exactly what I needed to do. I've done that. The pump is working just fine. There's one more thing that I need to do, and that is connect electrically in a more permanent fashion. I went looking for a weatherproof connector yesterday, and there were none in Flagstaff. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a butt splice that's crimp it together, and I'll let that go for right now. Well, less than 48 hours before we're supposed to leave for our trip to deal with Irene's business out in the middle of Pucky Brush in California, I have a week's worth of packing to do in this truck. I have less than 2 days to do it in. I have things to put away in various places, including an entire tray of tools that's out here on the table. Well, I hope this provides a little bit of information about what's been going on and why it's taken a while, but it's done. So, we'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye.